We're going to begin, though, with the growing alliance between Kim Jong-un and Russia's Vladimir Putin on full display in North Korea yesterday, raising concerns in the U.S. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer has the latest.
North Korea's Kim Jong-un pulling out all the stops in an elaborately choreographed state visit for Russian President Vladimir Putin. The outcast and sanctioned leaders side by side reviewing troops, cheered by crowds of children with balloons. Then in the front seat with Putin behind the wheel. Earlier, a friendly debate over who would be first into Kim's car, which was a gift from Putin last year. The two unveiled a strategic defense treaty promising mutual assistance in case either country faces aggression. The details of it not spelled out, but both calling it a breakthrough. The deepening alliance raising alarms for the U.S. and the West, who have worked to isolate Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. Putin has turned to North Korea, which, according to U.S. officials, has already sent millions of rounds of ammunition, artillery shells, and missiles to help Russia's war effort.
North Korea is providing significant munitions to Russia and other weapons for use in Ukraine.
A looming worry what North Korea might gain from Russia in return, including access to the sort of military technologies that could enhance Kim's nuclear, missile, and satellite programs. The visit and all its fanfare doing little to ease concerns.
Joining us now, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, retired four-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He's the Chief International Analyst for NBC News, and former National Security Council Asian Affairs Director Dr. Victor Cha. His latest op-ed for MSNBC.com is entitled, "Biden Needs to Disrupt the Russia-North Korea Alliance Before It's Too Late." So, Dr. Cha, let's start right there. How?
Well, it's not easy. The difficulties lie in the fact that this is a renewal of the Cold War alliance between the two sides. What North Korea provides to Russia goes deep through Russian territory in terms of munitions, very hard to intercept. But there still are a package of financial sanctions, as well as actions that could be taken vis-a-vis China to try to disrupt this network.
So, Admiral, let's talk about the ramifications of this alliance. And in some, there's analysis suggests this shows how desperate Putin is. The fact that he's got to turn to North Korea, the Hermit Kingdom, for more supplies for his war in Ukraine. But at the same time, to Victor's point, there is worry about these two autocrats teaming up.
Yeah, indeed. And, Putin finally found a leader that he's actually taller than. So I think this is a good moment for him. In all seriousness, what we ought to worry about deeply here, exactly as Dr. Cha said, is the technology push that could enable the Hermit Kingdom to use those 50 or 60 or maybe 70 nuclear weapons. So it's the technology, Jonathan, but it's also the intelligence. Putin can provide targeting. He can provide access to a satellite system that Russia owns and operates. So there's a package of high-tech incentives, both actual physical technology for the nuclear program, as well as intelligence, command and control. We have to be very concerned about this. Final thought, they're not revealing yet the details of the agreement they've signed. Sounds a lot like a mutual defense pact to me. Each nation would be obligated to defend the other. That's quite significant. That's what we have, for example, with Japan, with South Korea, with Australia, with our Pacific alliance. We don't want to see Putin start to build something with North Korea along those lines.
All right, so I want to bring Ed Luce into this. And Ed, if you don't mind, if I could ask you to get into the mind of one of the great geostrategic thinkers of our time, and I think you know who I'm talking about. What is the strategic vision of Putin and Kim Jong-un? What are they putting on display here? And what should the U.S. and its allies be doing right now to counter what looks like a collective threat?
Well, I mean, if you're referring, which I think you are, to your father, Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski, he coined the phrase alliance of the aggrieved way back in the 1990s, where he was quite prophetic in how he saw the world's, the nations, particularly the autocracies, reacting to this new global triumphalist era of democracy we had after the Cold War. And he talked about an alliance of the aggrieved, and he mentioned Russia, and he mentioned North Korea. Of course, it includes China, it includes Iran, and it includes some smaller countries like Cuba, Venezuela. But the strategy, I think, that he'd recommend, and that I think it would be utterly relevant, and I think Admiral Stavridis would probably agree with this now, is to play on China's fears of a wayward North Korea, a freelancing North Korea, because North Korea threatens Japan. Japan could go nuclear at any time. That is the last thing that China wants. And we've seen in the last few days a make-up meeting between the leaders of South Korea and China. South Korea and China. And, of course, South Korea is the real target of North Korea. Play on China's fear of anarchy in the region, because this doesn't suit their interests. They want stability.
So, Admiral Stavridis, chime in. Do you agree?
I do entirely. I'll add another interesting small point here, which is, where is Vladimir Putin today? He's left North Korea. He's in Vietnam. And Vietnam, by the way, has a population 4 times that of North Korea, about 100 million, dynamic economy, very strong demographics. Vietnam, in many ways, is a bigger opportunity for the West than North Korea. So I think if Dr. Brzezinski were advising us today, he'd be saying, not only shore up U.S., the alliances you have with Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Thailand, the Philippines, those are mutual defense treaties. You ought to focus U.S. on Vietnam for exactly the reasons Ed Luce is saying. You need to put pressure back. So I'm quite concerned you're showing footage now of Putin in Vietnam meeting with President Lam and others. We ought to be watching that flank as well. I think your dad would advise us to do so. It's all about alliances.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up there for Dr. Cha. It's actually a point that Ed made, which is our leverage, U.S. leverage, is not obviously quite strong with North Korea or Russia, but we do have some with the Chinese. Obviously, it's a contentious relationship, but it is a communicative relationship. And it strikes me, and I'm wondering if you could speak to this, that the real danger here is not necessarily a Russia-North Korea pact, but China being more forthcoming and providing more weaponry and intelligence to the Russians as they turn west to Ukraine. So what do you think the U.S. officials are saying to Beijing right now in light of the Putin-Kim Jong-un meeting that just occurred?
Well, I think that's right. The Chinese have not been providing weapons to Russia for Ukraine, but they have been providing a lot of industrial support. China cannot be happy with this meeting between Russia and North Korea, but they're not able to really make a decision about what to do. On the one hand, they don't want to criticize North Korea too much because they don't want to push Kim further into the arms of Putin. On the other hand, they're not willing to fully join on with Russia and North Korea because they don't want to be part of a grouping in which North Korean weapons are being used by Russia to kill Europeans today. That's not where China wants to be. So this is, I think, an opening for the United States, the Biden administration, to try to make some progress with China, whether it's with regard to new sanctions on North Korea, or whether it's even with regard to just an open statement about their concern about this relationship. The other thing I'd say is the NATO summit is in Washington, D.C. next month. This is a real opportunity for the Biden administration to work with allies, South Korea and Japan, to really build even more on the trilateral security relationship, maybe even a collective defense declaration among the 3 allies. That would be a hugely important step forward.